All right, hello, welcome back to Move with Joe. In today's video, we're going to be talking about scapular pain. That's right, that area that everybody gets knotted up in, creates tension and discomfort right in between the scapula or the shoulder blades. Today, we are going to do some exploration in terms of how the scapula move, and then at the end, we'll also do a little movement segment to help release some of that tension through the scapula. So let's get started. Let's begin with tuning into our own body. So please, if you aren't already, come up to standing. Take a moment to arrive in standing. Let your arms relax by your side. And I just want you to sense the length of each arm and the support of each arm. So thinking about the shoulder girdle, how it rests on the rib cage. If one arm feels like it's a little longer than the other, you can also sense whether or not one shoulder is a little bit higher. If you have a hard time sensing these things, you could also take a look in the mirror or just plant your fingers on your sides of your legs and see where it is that they get down to. So oftentimes there's little discrepancies, and that's not really that important, but it's just nice for a reference. The other thing that you can pay attention to is where your scapulas are. So do you feel like your scapulas are rounded forward, so your shoulders are rounding forward? Do you have a sense that your scapulas are tucked down the back or maybe elevated? To just get a general sense of where you think your scapulas are. All right. Next, let's have you just begin to lift one arm and just notice how you lift it up towards the ceiling. And you can lift the other arm and notice how that one goes. And not so much range, but just general ease. You can either do it palm up or palm down. Great. Now, to explore a couple of these scapular movements and what that does to your body, let's have you begin by elevating your shoulders. So you're going to begin to bring your shoulders up towards your ears, and you're going to hold it there. And I want you to first notice what happens to the quality of your breath. Does this make it easier? Does it make it more difficult to breathe? And then what would it be like to begin to lift your arm from this position? And just get a sense of the relative ease. You can try a variety of different movements with the scapulas elevated. You can bring the arm out to the side. You can try and reach around your back. You can reach across in front of you. What does it do if you begin to walk? Does this do elevated scapulas? How does that affect your arm swing? And what about the tone in your neck? Now that it's been up there for a little while, can you sense any type of discomfort or compression? All right, so that's good enough for those. Next, let's have you round your scapula forward. And so if you really round the scapula forward, and again, you can notice different movements. How does it affect the quality of the movement to round your scapula forward? There may be some things that become a little bit easier, like for example, maybe reaching around your back or reaching across yourself when the scapula rolls forward. It's not that any of these are necessarily good or bad, but it's becoming aware of the positive aspects of a particular position of the scapula and some of the drawbacks. All right, so next I'm going to have you retract your scapula. So pull your scapula back towards each other. It's as if you're going to pinch your spine with your scapula. And so this is the typical chest out. Now, lots of people are told, pull back your shoulders. And again, you can begin to explore what this does to maybe your movement in walking. And what would it feel like to maybe bend down and pick something off the floor with the scapulas retracted? What would it be like to reach out in front of you with the scapulas pulled back? And maybe what would it be like to reach behind you? Great. All right, lastly, let's bring the scapulas down the back. So it's as if to slide them down towards your buttock. And again, notice what this does to the tone in your neck, the quality of your breath. Lots of people tell you to have your scapulas seated down your back. What would that mean if you were to be typing all day? To have these scapulas pinned down. All right, excellent. So with that as a reference, go ahead and lie down on your either side, whichever side you want to work with. Have that side as the side up. All right, so coming down onto your side. So bend your knees a little bit. Bring your arm straight out in front of you. And we'll begin by placing the top arm just down the length of your side. So if your left arm is up, go ahead and place it so that it's along your left side. And again, we'll just begin to make some movements with the shoulders. And you could imagine there's a clock on the ceiling. And so 12 o'clock is up by your head, and 6 o'clock is down by your feet. And if I were to be looking directly up at the clock at the wall, that would mean 3 o'clock is in front of me and 9 o'clock is behind me. So what we'll begin to do is just begin to take the scapula between 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. And just notice which direction's easier, more natural. And for many of you, it might feel quite a bit easier to bring the shoulder blade up towards your ear, and maybe a little less familiar sliding it down the back or sliding your shoulder down your side. That's good. Give that a rest. And now begin to take the shoulder between 3 o'clock in front of you and 9 o'clock behind you. So it slides forward and back. And you're just trying to make the movement nice and smooth and easy. And you can pay attention to the gliding of the scapula on the back of the rib cage. And then go ahead and go back up to 12 and 6. And then let it rest for a moment. And now we'll begin to take the shoulder, the center of the shoulder, around the clock. So if we begin by starting by taking the shoulder up to 12, and then we're going to start to go forward to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And so I'll have you continue to make that movement on your own. You can count out if you'd like. But you could imagine as you're making the movement that you're really trying to hit each of the numbers. And the more clearly you hit the number, you could imagine that the numbers are lit. So if you hit the number, it lights up bright. And then there's probably a few numbers that are a little darker, that neurologically you don't quite have the kinesthetic sense or mapping to know where exactly you are in space. And so those are the areas that we want to kind of slow down in and really try and figure out, oh, where is that space maybe between 7 and 8? At least that's for me, where it's like, oh, I'm not quite sure. All right. Give it a rest for a moment. If you'd like to roll onto your back for a second, you can do that. And if you're lying on your back, just notice if there's any little change that you can sense with just the relaxation or the input, the stimulus that you have done with the left side compared to the right side, or vice versa, depending on which shoulder you chose. And go ahead and roll back onto your side. And this time begin to place the arm back up on your side and begin to go counterclockwise around the clock. And it's interesting, you might notice that going counterclockwise is a very different experience in terms of what areas are more readily available, easier to get to, and which ones maybe are a little bit fuzzier. You may notice that going one direction, you're quicker, more fluid. Maybe the other direction, there's a little bit more of some speed bumps along the way. Again, so it's not about speed. It's actually really helpful to slow down. If you move too quickly, you don't even know what you're hitting. So by slowing it down, going number by number, you can really refine that mapping of the movement. All right, give that a rest. And this time, bring your arm straight up in the air. And you can relax the wrist and the fingers. You're going to begin to reach the arm up towards the ceiling and let it come back. And again, you want to notice that scapular glide. So the arm isn't actually getting longer, the bones of the arm. So it's actually the lengthening of the scapula relative to the ribcage that is what's creating that lifting motion. And you can lift and rotate the arm internally so the thumb begins to go behind you. You can lift and externally rotate. So play around with that. Once going in, once going out. All right, good. Let that rest. And once again, go ahead and try just doing a clockwise circle and see what the availability of that circle is now. And for many of you, you'll start to notice that there's some greater ease. Maybe there's some more fluidness in that circular motion. And if there's a particular area that you're struggling with, there's a couple strategies for finding those areas. So let's say maybe 5 o'clock is difficult for me. So I could start by going down to 6 o'clock. Maybe 6 o'clock is super easy or easier. And then from 6, I could actually start to reverse back to 5, 4, 3. And then I could go back down to 6. So 3, 4, 5, 6. So you start working in from the edges into that area that is less familiar. So go ahead and take a moment to come on up. So now that you're back up and standing, just take a moment to come back into your body and assess where things are at. So notice what may have shifted with the arm that you worked on. In my case, it was the left arm. And maybe there's some more latent tone on that side from some of the movements that you were doing. Oftentimes people experience a sense of greater depth of that shoulder, maybe some more fluidity. You can just tune back into yourself, notice the sense of height in your shoulders, the space between the shoulder blades and between the back, as well as the length of the arms. You can go ahead and try lifting that arm up, noticing how it feels, bringing it back down, noticing what it's like with the other arm, bring it back down. All right, so to recap, the scapula is a super important part of our shoulder that oftentimes we hold too much tension in. And sometimes that's unconscious tension when we're stressed and our shoulders begin to creep up. But it's also posturally when we think we're doing the right thing and we're pulling our scapulas back and we're seating them down our back to have that more upright stance. But as you probably realized in the beginning, when you have that muscular tension holding things in place, it actually doesn't allow for much freedom of movement, nor does it allow for much freedom of breath. So the trick is to have a sense of mobility and availability for the scapula to be able to move in all the directions that it should. So that means that the scapula should elevate at times, it should depress at times, it should retract backwards at times, and it should slide forward. And to have that availability in the movement in pretty much anything that we're doing, whether it's walking, as the arm swings, the scapula is moving along the rib cage. If it's not, then we might start looking like a T-Rex walking. So hopefully this was insightful. You gained a little perspective. The shoulder circles are a really great thing to do when you're feeling that muscular tension. Helps to start to improve glide in the scapula, as well as lubricate the shoulders and let go of some of that tension that accumulates. So I hope you liked the video. Please leave a comment, hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.